Hi, I'm John Cash. Welcome to John Cash Ministries and Revelations Church's daily devotion. Today we're in Psalm 36, looking at verses 1 through 4. Here's a question. Can God still bless America? Certainly, in the past, God has blessed America tremendously. But can he continue to bless America while we continue down this spiraling course into depravity, especially with our younger generation? Well, let's take a look at what the book of Psalms says about this. This is 36, 1 through 4. David, King David, wrote this, and during his reign, there was a lot of evil developing in the culture, and it broke his heart. And he details this in the first 4 verses. First verse says this, "An oracle is within my heart concerning the sinfulness of the wicked." Number one, he says, look, man, there's something welling up in my heart. I've just got to say, I'm looking out at the landscape and I don't like what I see. If you're a Christian, do you like what you see? What's happening in America today with our culture? Obviously, the answer is no. He then says, there is no fear of God before his eyes. In other words, the first thing that happens with a culture that begins to walk away from God is that they lose the fear of God, the fear of the consequences of sin. You see, when you lose the fear of God, what happens is you begin to do things the way you want to do them. And you don't think really in your heart that God really sees or that he even exists, or even if he does, he's not going to judge you for it because God is love. And so with that concept in mind, people do whatever they want, thinking, hey, no big deal. God doesn't have any standards. I don't even believe him in any way. So it starts with no fear of God. Verse 2, it continues down this slippery slope. And it says this, for in his own eyes he flatters himself too much to detect or hate his sin. When a culture begins to move away from God, they begin to flatter themselves in their own eyes. In other words, pride and ego begin to take over. They begin to do things however they choose, thinking that they are their own master and that they're not going to answer to anybody at any time, especially when they die. So they flatter themselves, or in their own eyes, they flatter themselves too much to detect or hate their sin. In other words, their pride gets so built up that they're no longer able to detect their sin. You ever meet anybody like that who has such ego and pride that they can't see the sin in their lives? It's very common. In America today, there's so many people out there who flatter themselves in their own eyes, and they cannot detect the sin. They don't even admit that what they do is sinful because there is no right. There is no wrong anymore. So too much to detect or hate his sin or their sin. It's very important to understand, if you're a believer, that you need to hate your sin. And to hate your sin, you have to know what is sinful and what is not sinful. In our modern culture, we're no longer even admitting what is sin and what is not sin, what is right and wrong. Then in verse 3, it gets even worse. It then says, the words of his mouth are wicked and deceitful. He has ceased to be wise and to do good. In verse 3, we see the culture falling apart. We see the mouths of the people becoming wicked and deceitful. The things coming out of people's mouths are ugly and mean and vicious, and plenty of lies. Remember, Satan is the father of lies. And they become foolish, according to Scripture. That's why it says they cease to be wise. If you cease to be wise, you have become foolish. A foolish person says in their heart that there is no God. A foolish person says that God is not watching. A foolish person says that God does not judge. A foolish person makes up the rules of what is right and wrong, thinking that God could care less. And then it says this, verse 4, even on his bed he plots evil. Watch this. He commits himself to a sinful course and does not reject what is wrong. Unfortunately, many in America today have committed themselves to a sinful course. They are committed. In other words, they're sold out, absolutely believing that they're right, that there is no standard right and wrong, that the Bible is no longer something that's legitimate. It's just a bunch of fairy tales. They are committed to an evil, sinful lifestyle, and even thinking, some of them, that they're going to go to heaven with that type of evil commitment. And they reject what is truth. And so, folks, today in America, you have to ask yourself, looking at this, will God continue to bless America if we continue down the course we are going? Politicians love to say it. We as Americans love to believe it. But will God bless a country that discards him and kicks him to the curb? The answer is no. That's why I'm praying for a great revival in the coming years in the United States of America.